You and your venturing team approach a door, and as you attempt to open it, you find that it is locked. What do? So this is my first time playing. What can I really do? So when you're approached with an obstacle like this in D&D, there's a few things you can do. You can either kick down the door, try to kick down the door, or you can try to lock the pick, or you can ignore the obstacle altogether to see if I can kick the door down or lock the pick or something. Okay, I want to kick the door down. So how do I do that? Okay, so you're gonna try to kick down the door. So roll for me an athletics check. Okay. All right. That's the D20. Roll the 20. Okay. Which one is that one? The big one. Okay, rolling the 20. I got an 18. Then you're gonna look at your character sheet and you're gonna find your athletics modifier. Yeah, it's a +4. You're gonna add that. So 22. Okay, so as you approach the door, you run at it and you just kind of kick with all your might, and the door just kind of right into the doorway and just blows right off its hinges. Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Squirtle Master Kenobi. I am bringing you my first episode of Dungeons and Dragons for Noobs. I know that there's a lot of Dungeons and Dragons videos out there already, and I'm sure they're probably going to be much better than mine, but I just figured I would go ahead and throw in my my little version, because everyone has their own preference of what they enjoy, what is good for them, and so maybe there's something in my video that is easier for people to digest or more understandable for some, and maybe others won't like it, but this is for you, for your benefit. If you're looking into getting into Dungeons and Dragons, I'm going to try to have a series of videos to kind of help with some basic player rules, and hopefully in the future I'm going to try to see if I can't get some more advanced stuff in videos, but for now it's just going to probably be some very basic Dungeons and Dragons for Noobs stuff. And the first episode that I have for you today is for ability scores and what they do. What are these things? These are your stats for the game, right? These help to determine the outcome of your actions. So we will go through each one of them. There's 6 different ones, and I'll kind of explain a little bit about how to use each one of them. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to be using the Player's Handbook from D&D Beyond to help me out with this. If you go to Chapter 7 in your own Player's Handbook, you'll see the Using Ability Scores chapter, and it'll provide you a lot of context and a lot of information about how to use these, but I'm going to try to break it down the best I can in as little amount of time as I possibly can, so that this video is watchable and not, just some D&D nerd just going on for too long about something that nobody cares about. So, first up is like the primary one that most people kind of think about when first going to Dungeons & Dragons is strength. Strength is predominantly, it's what you think it is going to do. It's going to measure your physical prowess. It's going to be the ability score that you use to determine, sword attacks, to determine when you punch someone, if you're trying to kick down a door, if you're trying to lift a boulder, many different things. Dexterity, the next one, is what you'd think. It's essentially your ability, your agileness, your speed, your flexibility in situations. A lot of dexterity has to do with things like being good with your hands, like picking locks, or climbing trees, or ranged attacks like with a bow and different things like that. A lot of my favorite characters are dexterity users, because I just like the combat when I have like a gun or a bow or a finesse weapon that I'm a bard with a rapier or something. It's just so much fun for me to play those kinds of characters. Constitution is the next one. And I would say that this is a relatively important stat for most characters, because it is your health modifier. It helps you to be able to combat status ailments like poison and paralysis, It helps your casters a lot with concentration spells, and it determines it helps to determine your maximum HP count. Also, it can help with certain things like fatigue, and when you have um, when there's something that's going to require a lot of endurance, Constitution is going to be your friend in those areas. Next is intelligence. Obviously, that's going to measure your reasoning, your memory, your level of knowledge. And there's only two classes that primarily use this as their main stats, and that would be the Artificer and the Wizard. But intelligence is a measurement of your sentience in a sense as a human, as a humanoid creature. So there is a maximum low score that you can have before your character is unable to speak, which can be really fun to play. It can be really fun to have a character that is like a caveman and goes oh the whole time and different things like that. But if you want to not make it difficult for yourself and actually be able to speak and use words, having a relatively decent intelligence modifier is going to be an okay thing for every character to want. Wisdom is a very important one for a lot of classes too. Actually, rangers need it for their casting, as do both clerics and druids. But it also, there's a lot of perception and insight checks that come from wisdom, and you're going to want to be able to get good bonus points to those rolls. And then the last one is charisma, and that essentially measures your personality. How pretty are you? How attractive are you? How how charismatic are you? Essentially, how do you fare in public settings? And there are 4 classes that use that: Paladin, Bard, Sorcerer, and Warlock. And so those are their primary stats. And so one thing with these stats, when you roll your stats, you're going to want to kind of consider, what class am I playing? Am I going to play a warrior? Am I going to play a caster? Am I going to play, support? And then because of that, what kind of stats am I probably going to need in combat? What kind of stats? And then on top of that also, how do you want your character to be played? Are you going to be a turtle monk and kind of play a Michelangelo type of character? And if that's the case, you kind of want a low intelligence, a medium wisdom, and a high charisma with good strength and dexterity. Are you going to play someone like, let's say, are you going to play like a sword wielder, like, and make him kind of a personality like Yoda? Then you want a high intelligence and a high wisdom. You want a pretty good dexterity. Strength only has to be so. Constitution can be medium, but charisma, that one would be one you'd want to probably put for Yoda. I mean, it's all in how you interpret the character too that you're trying to play. You want to play a gambler that is really bad at reading the poker faces on people's face. Give them a low intelligence and a low wisdom, but like have them skyrocket in that charisma and that dexterity. There's all kinds of different things. See, the stats are not purely just for combat; they are also for your role playing ability within the game. And so your scores have a range of essentially like 1 to 20. Now, usually, well, you can get up to 30, but usually most people have a highest stat of maybe 20, because typically you're, as a player, not allowed to go higher than 20. That being said, some monsters and some NPCs might have higher scores than that. And if your campaign manager, your DM, is allowing you to exceed those scores, then you might have one higher than that. Each score gives a different bonus or lack thereof bonus. So, for example, if you're trying to play an idiot that, isn't super dumb, but dumb enough to probably put their foot in their mouth a few times, you're probably going to want to give them like an intelligence of somewhere between like a 6 and an 8 or a 9. In which case, as you can see on this table, the 8 and the 9 gives you a -1, and the 6 and the 7 gives you -2. Now, what does that mean? So, I'll open up a character sheet for you, and I'll kind of show you what that means. So this right here is my character that I've been playing in a campaign. And as you can see, his intelligence is at a +6 because it's 22. Now, this is because in my campaign, I've given them special abilities that allow them to exceed one ability score modifier. One ability score. So, the intelligence modifier that my character has is important for my spellcasting because my spellcasting as an artificer is based on my intelligence. And so when I cast, say, what would be a good one? Cure Wounds. Cure Wounds normally does 1d8 plus, so you roll an 8-sided dice, the diamond, and then you would add your spell modifier to that, which would be your intelligence for an artificer. So the fact that I get a +6 to Cure Wounds means that when I cast Cure Wounds, I can have anywhere from 7, so I just rolled a 2, so that'd be 2 plus 6, that's an 8. So I can get anywhere from 7 points to 14 points in health to myself or a friend in the party. Another thing for intelligence modification is, as you can see right here, the skills chart that I'm looking at. You can see all the abbreviations of the skills that these of the ability scores that these skills use. So, for example, nature is an intelligence check. So if I'm out in the world and we're trying to find where north is, right? Because we have to head north to go to the next destination. The DM will say, "Please make a nature check," and so then I'd be like, "Okay, I will roll my 20-sided dice." And I rolled a 5. Okay, so that's not a great roll, right? 5 is likely not going to, on its own, be able to do much. But because of the fact that in nature I have a +6, I can add 6 to my 5, which allows me to actually have a nature check of 11. So if my nature check of 11 was a high enough roll, then I can know where nature is, where north is. But if it wasn't a high enough roll, then the DM would say something to be like, "Well, it's been a while since you've tried to find north on your own without a compass or something. But to your best reckoning, in the way that the magnetic pole of the land feels, you kind of feel that way is north." And they'll point in a direction on the map or whatever. They'll describe to you a direction that they're suggesting you think is north. But all the while, you might be thinking that you're taking your party north, but you could be unwittingly moving west or east or even northeast. So it kind of depends on how close your score was to being able to beat the what is called the difficulty rating or the difficulty challenge or the DC of the check. So ability scores are used predominantly for a lot of things like this, where you are figuring out how successful you are at something. So yeah, you're generally going to be speaking, you're going to really want to get somewhere around a 14 to a 17 for your strong ability scores that you really want to. Because like I said, obviously the highest you can get would be a 20, which would be a +5. Most people that have somewhere between like an 18 and a 20 on their ability score, those are like people that are ridiculous. They're like, idiot, savant, genius people in that ability score. So someone with like an 18 or a 19 strength would be someone like Mr. Universe or like Arnold Schwarzenegger, where they're a big bodybuilder and they have a lot of muscle, but they're not necessarily the average person's strength. So one way that you can really kind of determine a lot of things is this +0 right here is sort of the average person, right? A 12 or a 13 is someone who probably goes to the gym a few times a week and is relatively healthy, A 14 or a 15 is probably someone like who is like kind of a hardcore gym goer, or at least has some sort of very physically, at least for a strength modification anyways, some sort of physically demanding job like construction worker or refrigerator delivery man. 16 to a 17 is probably going to be someone like Chris Evans or Chris Hemsworth, who have these hardcore workouts to have the superhero body. And then your 18 and 19 and 20 is going to be people like Dwayne Johnson and Arnold Schwarzenegger that are just meat men. They're just huge built. And of course, that's going to be the same, but with different examples all across the board with things like intelligence and charisma. Like charisma is going to, like someone who has a 20 charisma is essentially like the most like persuasive. They may not really be a good person, but they can really get what they want by they're like the most hot, beautiful girl in the room. They're the cleverest, funniest, coolest guy at the party. They know how to get what they want by just schmoozing people. And they may be very attractive. They may not be very attractive. It depends. Someone with a high intelligence is like an Einstein. Like someone around that 18 to 20 range is going to be like Albert Einstein, or like, what would be another one that's a really, 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 really smart, intelligent, like a Sheldon Cooper kind of person from Big Bang Theory. So, ability scores are really important to consider, how you want your character to be played and what kind of a thing that you're using your character for. On top of the ability score bonus as well, you can also have certain things like advantage and disadvantage, or proficiency bonus. Now, first we'll go over the advantage and disadvantage. So an advantage or disadvantage essentially means that you'll roll your d20 twice, or you'll roll 2 d20s. And if it's an advantage, right, you'll roll your 2 d20s. And so I rolled a 9 and I rolled an 8. So if I'm rolling with advantage, then I take the 9 instead of the 8. If I'm rolling at disadvantage, I take the 8 instead of the 9. So the disadvantage is you take the lower of the 2 die rolls. Advantage, you take the higher of the 2 die rolls. And that is pretty simple, self-explanatory kind of thing. It doesn't really take a whole lot to figure out. Now, there are certain class features or race features that allow you to be able to do certain things, like a halfling's luck lets you re-roll a 1. And there are other kinds of things too, like you could have an ability that says I can choose to re-roll a bad number if I want to, one time when I have Bardic Inspiration or something like that, which that I can go into when I go over different classes. The next thing is the proficiency bonus, and that essentially is every character has this, which is the proficiency bonus. That's initiative, sorry. Proficiency bonus, which is right here. It's the same, that's why I got confused. Proficiency bonus is essentially a bonus number that you add to your rolls in things that you're good at doing. So, for example, these black dots on here show the skills that I'm proficient with. So my character is good with Arcana, which Arcana is essentially an intelligence check that measures my ability to recall lore about spells, magic items, eldritch symbols, magic traditions, planes of existence, etc., etc., etc. You, as a dungeon master, can make exceptions or alterations to and around that, depending on how it fits within your campaign. But because I have a high intelligence, and I have, which is a +6 and a +3 in proficiency, I have a +9 to Arcana checks. So whenever I want to say, I'm going to look at this rune in this wall, and I want to make an Arcana check to see if I recognize it from any spell books that I've read along the way, I could be like, boom, I rolled a 1, which I'll get into that in just a second. But essentially, 1 + 9 would mean that my check was a 10. Now, depending on what campaign you are, if you roll a 1, that's usually what's called a critical fail, or an automatic fail, regardless of what your modifier is. But again, that even sometimes comes down to the DM and the situations that they want to use those in. Some DMs only use them in combat. Some DMs use them in RP situations as well. But a critical failure would be something to the effect of, if I'm in combat and I, swung my sword at the enemy, but there's a friendly right next to me, what the DM might do is the DM might say, okay, Charlie, after James's attack, I need you to roll a dodge, a dexterity save. And so you would roll your d20 and add your dexterity saving throw, which would be this one up here in the saving throw box. And whatever ability, whatever DC that the DM has set up for this, if you hit lower than it, then you get hit by your he'll make it so that you'll get hit by your friend's sword and take the damage instead of the enemy. Another thing that sometimes can happen is if you're like shooting someone with a bow, the DM might be like, yeah, you pull your bowstring too far back, and the string on your bow breaks, which essentially would render your bow unusable until you can get back to town, or unless you had some string on hand that when you were at a break at some point you could restring your bow. But that again would require you to be able to have the ability to do that, have some sort of Fletcher's tools, or so Boyer's toolkit that allows you to be able to do that kind of a thing. And so there's a lot of different role playing and different cool things that can happen even within combat. But yeah, so the proficiency bonus essentially allows me to add this little bonus to whatever score I'm using to check my score. Now, for example, perception is a +7 because it's my wisdom +4 plus my proficiency. So with these bonuses, they're automatically put in there. So it's not like I have a +7 and then I add the +3. When I have the black dot right there on perception, it's automatically adding the proficiency. And that's one thing that's really nice about D&D Beyond, is that a lot of it is algorithms and the way that the software is coded, so I don't have to do a lot of that math for me. I mean, watch this even. I can even be like, click the button and it will do a dice roll for me. So, and then it'll give me my result, and it'll tell me what that result is for. Now, it can be hard to use these dice if you're trying to use a lot of homebrew stuff, but... so, anything else on ability scores? Well, I mean, here's what I was talking about earlier. The difficulty class. Very easy, medium, hard, very hard, nearly impossible. So, like, for example, the skit that I played at the beginning of kicking down the door, right? That would be probably a medium or a hard difficulty. So in order to really, kick the door in, you'd have to reach that, 15 to 20 range on your kick. And it kind of depends on, okay, the door's locked, but like also in the DM's creation of the door, even though the door's locked, is the door really stable? Because you could have like a really creaky wooden door that's old and isn't really very stable. And the lock and the hinges are just barely holding it there. In which case, kicking the door in could even potentially even be an easy task. One time when I was in high school, I was in New Mexico doing a mission trip with my youth group, and we went to the place that we were staying at, which was like on this reservation. And all the boys were staying in this one house, and all the girls were staying in this other house. And so the girls were helping me and my friend Josh go back to our house because we had guitars and stuff that we were the worship leaders, so we were doing the music for it. So they were asking who had the key, and I was like, I got it right here. And I walked up the door, and I just I kicked it a little harder than I intended to, but I kicked it not very hard, and the door kind of just came off its hinges a little bit, and we had to fix it the next day. So, I mean, I wouldn't say that I made like a great strength check roll when I did that, in real life, but a lot of it does come down to, okay, is this like a really secure door, or is this like, oh boy, that's not great. And then also sometimes you can work together on things, and then your DM will be like, all right, so because the whole group is helping you, you're going to get a +2 to your strength check, or you're going to get an advantage to your strength check, or something like that. Yeah, so I mean that's basically ability scores in a nutshell. I probably went on a little longer than I intended to, but yeah. So ability scores are going to be your primary resource of how your character is played in a lot of ways. So as you can see, my character on here, he's got a high intelligence, which means he's a very, very smart, genius level person. He's relatively dexterous. He's okay strong. He's healthy. He's wise, and he's relatively like, I wouldn't say he's super charismatic, but he's enough charismatic that he's not, people aren't disgusted by him. So, but I can just real quickly, I'll show you another character that would have different stats. Okay, look at this character right here, Brazier. He is a fire genasi, and he is a wizard. He's also got a high level intelligence, but his charisma and his wisdom are much lower. His dexterity is a little less, his strength is a little less, but his constitution is about the same. So you can see how the characters, they can be similar but different at the same time. And as you can see, he's got fire spells, and he's got a sword that he uses. So this is another character that you could throw together something like this. So the last thing I'll just leave you off with is just how would you make ability scores? And there's a few different things that you can do. I won't go into great heavy detail about them, but one way that's very common among folk is they usually do a dice roll method where they grab 4 6-sided dice. Those are the generic cube dice right here. And they roll them. And then they add them all together, but they drop the lowest number. So see, I rolled 2 5s, a 4, and a 1. So then that would be 15, but because I'm dropping the 1, I have a 14. So that would be 1. I'd write a 14 down. And I do that a total of 6 times so I could get 6 stats. And so the hope is that you'd roll 3 6s and like a 5 or whatever, so that you could then have an 18 in an ability score. Another way that people do things is they just roll 3 dice and they take those 3 numbers and that's their ability score. Another way they do it is they roll 3 dice and they drop the lowest and add 6 to the other 2. So, for example, I rolled 2 6s and a 2. So that would be an 18 score mod because I dropped the 2 and then it add the 2 6s together for 12, and then it adds 6 to that number. That's a good way to beef up the numbers a little bit, and like pretty much be sure that you won't ever get lower than like an 8 score, because the lowest you would ever be able to get would be if you rolled 3 1s, so you'd roll 2. See, whereas with the drop the lowest on 44, you could actually legitimately get an ability score of 3 because you could roll 4 1s. That would be really hard. It could be really fun if you throw that bad boy in like intelligence or charisma and you play a really stinky person. But it's a riskier play playing that one. Another way you could do it is you could roll a d20, and whatever you roll on that 1d20, that's your stat. So I just rolled a 2, so that means one of my stats is a 2. Another roll is a 15, so a 2 and a 15. Another roll is a 6, so I have a 2, a 15, and a 6. Then a 14, and then a 12, and then a 12. So those aren't great stats. My highest stat was a 15, and I had a 2 in there. So what am I going to put that 2 in? Like Constitution, and just be like a really smart guy, like a 15 in intelligence and a 2 in Constitution, be like a really smart guy that's just unhealthy, like Michael Morbius from Marvel Comics. I mean, sure, why not? Anyway, sorry, I know this was a long video. Did not intend for that to be a long video. I hope it was informative. I hope it wasn't too rambly. Thank you for watching if you got to this point. Thank you for supporting me as in the ways that you have. If you haven't already, please hit that like button. Please subscribe to me. And please keep an eye out for more videos. Thank you very much.